Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. So, I'm going to start off with a quick clip from Lauren Boebert. I know she's a polarizing figure, but she brings up a good point on this video, on her manifesto, if you would, because every time somebody just talks and there's just a wall behind them, I always think it's like a manifesto or some sort of, just like the Unabomber videos. So, here we go.
The bottom line is that this bill directs 90% of its money to the wrong targets. It rewards blue states and localities that continue to force unnecessary lockdowns on the American people, that have mismanaged their budgets and simply don't need this funding. With $4 trillion already spent on 5 COVID bills, no one can argue that Congress hasn't spent enough money already. Congress just hasn't spent the money wisely or in the right places. And this bill is no different. We don't need another Boulder bailout. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to pass my motion and stop rewarding those who don't need or deserve this funding and that are causing harm to students, small businesses, and everyday Americans.
So she brings up a good point, right? So, hey, we've already spent $4 trillion. So it's not a question of if we've spent enough money. She believes that we have had. She believes that we've spent the money poorly, right? And there's a big difference. So there's a difference between having enough money and then spending more money than what you make, right? So so it's one of those things where when I was in the military, I would see people who'd get promoted, and as soon as they get promoted, they buy a very expensive car, and they're basically car broke, or they basically offset their pay raise with a new car payment, or they get a bigger apartment, or they do something irresponsible with their money. So basically, their net gain is probably a negative because they then spend more money than they had increased in their salary. So basically, that's what she's saying. She's like, why are we bailing out these blue states who mismanaged their budgets are now operating in the red? And what? So now people in Texas need to subsidize people in California, or people in Florida need to subsidize people in Illinois. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I agree with her on this. We've spent a lot of money. Inflation's going to hit. We need to figure out a more responsible way of addressing these budget deficits. You even have states doing ridiculous things. You have California trying to pass their nearly 17% uh, state tax. That's bonkers. And that's on top of the federal taxes. You had 50 Cent, right? You had him before the election in 2020 basically say 62% on taxes. You must be out of your mind. I'm going to vote for Trump. It doesn't matter if he's a racist because I refuse to pay 62% in taxes. It disincentivizes people to work hard when they know that the government will take more money than they earn. That's ridiculous, right? Or basically, that the government takes a bigger piece of the pie than the actual person making the money takes. That is bananas on so many levels because not only do you pay that 62% in taxes, you then also have to pay your property taxes, your sales tax, your this tax, your that tax, your what all your consumer taxes is stacked on top of that. So not only do you pay 62% in taxes, but you end up paying nearly 70 to 75% in taxes when it's all said and done. And that's what's ridiculous. You can't just keep printing money expecting, you can't keep throwing money at an issue thinking it's going to solve the issue. If these states are run extremely poorly, perhaps they should change it up. I watched a video, I think it was by the Daily Wire recently, and they were asking questions. Yeah, yeah. So basically what it was who said this, right? And basically it was a Joe Biden statement and a Donald Trump statement. And everybody thought that the extremely racist statements were made by Donald Trump when they're in fact made by Joe Biden. But at the end, he basically asked, he was like, so the inner cities or the main cities throughout the country are all or have all been ran by Democrats for like 60 years. And we can all agree that they're run poorly. So why don't you vote Republican just to try it out? And you see the person that says, well, I was told that Democrats are going to fix the issue. And he's like, well, it's been 60 years and the issue hasn't been fixed. Why don't you try something different? He's like, trying something different. I don't know about that. And it's like, well, what you're currently doing is not working. Bashing your head up against a concrete wall is not working. How about you try this sledgehammer? Maybe the sledgehammer can break the concrete wall. Ah, but everybody says I need to just keep bashing my head up against the wall and eventually the wall will give. Well, dude, it's been 60 years. You're bleeding. You got a flat spot on your forehead. Why don't you try this tool? Try something different. Even if it's only temporary, try it for 4 years. And what happens if it does benefit the inner cities? What if going red helps the inner cities? But you'll never know if you never try. That's basically the punchline. And that's, I think, where she's trying to get at here is hey, we're spending a lot of money, and spending money isn't fixing the issues. We need to fix the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of these problems are some of these cities and states who just completely destroyed their economy and basically what so states who didn't destroy their economies now need to offset their failure. No, that's not going to happen. I live in Texas. I should not have to subsidize the state of California. In the state of California, I can go to Nancy Pelosi's driveway, poop on it, and not get in trouble because their state is ran into the ground. I can pop a tent in Nancy Pelosi's sidewalk in front of her house, sleep in front of her house, and guess what? That's allowed because that's allowed in California. You can't basically allow your state to run like a third world country and then expect all the other states to subsidize you. That's not going to work. And with this, I agree with Lauren Boebert. I do believe she comes from the left field, not as in politically speaking from the left, but as in some of the things she says. And she definitely is like I guess not to sound, misogynistic, but she is kind of a firecracker, right? She says things and it ticks a lot of people off. She definitely drops a lot of incendiary bombs just to get. I honestly, I think they need to, if CNN and a lot of these Democrat people wish to talk about, oh, the who's the voice and the face of the party. It's not Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think it's Lauren Boebert, and they by ignoring her right now, I think they're scared of Lauren Boebert, and there's a reason why they don't give her a lot of airtime. Not as much airtime as Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a good boogeyman because she believes in cuckoo banana stuff. But the stuff Lauren Boebert says, if you go past that, she's not the most educated individual in the world. And people like to say that like that's a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing because guess what? When you draft laws, Congress has lawyers who basically make sure that the laws are legal, right? So you don't need to be a lawyer to be a congressperson as long as you represent the will of your people. And if she represents the people in her district and the people in her district are satisfied with her, then she's doing the job she's supposed to be doing. So all these attacks on her about not being educated enough or being a gun nut or whatever, I think is probably more misogynistic than me saying, oh, she likes to say things that get attention. She likes to say things that ruffles feathers because guess what? That basically shines a spotlight on her and she can say, hey, I am saying the right thing. I'm just not saying it in a way that you like it. Let's jump over to Ryan Savdera. If I did my homework on where the candidates actually stood on the issues, I would not have voted that the way that I did. And basically, he's summarizing Dr. Naomi Wolf's tweet. She is a left wing commentator. She's a feminist. She's all these things. But here's her tweet. If I'd known Biden was open to lockdowns, as he now states, which is something historically unprecedented in any pandemic and a terrifying practice, one that won't ever end because elites love it, I would never have voted for him. Great segment from liberal feminist and author and former Clinton advisor Naomi Wolf on the importance of battling COVID fascism. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say all this can be suspended if there's a bad disease. Why isn't more of this coming from liberals? So let's see what she has to say.
Government power, which is really characteristic of Italian fascism in the 20s, and they're using that to engage in kind of emergency orders that simply strip us of our rights to property, rights to assembly, rights to worship, and all of the rights that our Constitution guarantees. So people are definitely horrified and noticing. I think people are shocked and divided, as I mentioned before. And the other thing that happened is, you said this has all been very sudden. And when you look back, March of 2020, a lot of things started to move that kind of locked into place a set of policies that are kind of 360-degree full-on totalitarian policies. So I think a lot of us are kind of in culture shock. Luckily or unluckily, I've been studying closing democracies for 12 years. So I recognized early on, once I realized New York State had emergency powers, I know from history that no one gives up emergency powers willingly. They always drag it on and drag it on. And so every month I'm getting in my email an announcement that Governor Cuomo is extending emergency measures. Only from studying history do I know how predictable it is when you start to have elected officials say, we are not going to follow the Constitution because there's a pandemic. And I just want to say lastly, and then I promise I'll stop, nowhere in the Constitution does it say all this can be suspended if there's a bad disease. We have lived through typhus, cholera, smallpox, HIV, tuberculosis, polio, the Spanish flu. We've lived through an attack on our soil. Never have there been months and months and months of emergency powers when we weren't actually fighting a war. So this is completely unprecedented. Lockdowns have never been done before in free societies, and really we're turning into a version of a totalitarian state sort of before everyone's eyes. And I really hope we wake up quickly, because history also shows that it's a small window in which people can fight back before it's too dangerous to fight back.
Man, I'm starting to think that we're being divided as a country precisely so we don't have conversations like this.
Yeah, so you have a liberal basically saying, hey, this is how authoritarianism starts, right? So you have someone on the right and you have someone on the left, and they go, hey, what Cuomo's doing in New York, this expanding of executive power, or emergency powers rather, is disturbing. It is dangerous, because once people have those emergency powers, think Patriot Act, think all the things that happened after 9/11. Now think of all the things that are happening now due to COVID. They don't relinquish those powers. They pretend like they do, but they still keep like 80% of it, right? So they're going to go, oh, we're not going to lock down that hard, but you don't really remember what it's like to be free. So we're only going to give you 20% of your freedoms back, and you're going to feel so much more free because you're now allowed to breathe 20% more than you're currently allowed right now. So imagine if we take 50% of the oxygen out of the room and you're barely surviving. You're forced to lay down. You're forced to basically sleep, because if you do anything more, you would essentially suffocate because there's not enough oxygen in the room. Scientifically, I don't know if you would already be dead if that was the point, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. But if you then increase the oxygen by 20%, you're going to feel so much better, because now you're not dying. Now you can start walking around, but you can't run. You can't go play with your kids. You can't do all this, because if you exert yourself too much, you'll still die. But now you can at least walk around. You can go to the store. Possibly you can take off that mask at some point. Oh my goodness. Wouldn't that be great if eventually you can take off your mask? But the only way you can take off your mask is now if you have a vaccine passport and you have to scan everything to go into these buildings. It's just this dystopian nightmare, to be honest. And I think that Dr. Wolf is acknowledging the reality of this. And I think this is what scares the establishment the most. It's when you have the populist left and the populist right agree that the establishment is the issue. The establishment won't allow for things like this to happen. So I was going to do another segment on kids in cages, but I'll do that for my next video for today. So you have that to look forward to. So before I take off, why don't you go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please go to notcensoredyet.com. Look around the website. I'm still working on it right now. News aggregator's up. Fact checker is fact checking right now. I only have a few posts on that up because there's only so many hours in the day. And if you wish to contribute to the show, there is a page on notcensoredyet.com/donate. There's links available to help us out. Every little bit helps. We wish to stay independent from outside influence. So until I post a video up in a couple hours, I'll see you all later. Have a good one. Bye.